Welcome to Click for Biology. We are studying D3.1 reproduction, and in this particular video we're going to be looking at oogenesis, the production of egg cells. There is a PDF linked into the description. Download that, annotate that with your own notes, and then take the 10 question quiz, which has answers to evaluate your own learning. So as we progress through this particular discussion on the development of the egg cell, remember that the egg cell is known as the oocyte, and this is going to go through a number of changes, including mitosis and the phases of meiosis, meiosis 1 and 2. There's also the egg is surrounded by cells seen here in what is known as a primary follicle, a simple structure. There's the oocyte in the center, and the primary follicles are arranged around the outside, like so, in the simplest and smallest of the follicles. And this is going to develop into the larger follicles as the egg cell develops, as it goes through its development. So the follicular cells also go through development. And of course, we should remember that these follicular cells are responsible for the production of estrogen. Looking and focusing on two aspects of this egg production, we have oogenesis, which are the phases of mitosis and meiosis that the cell will go through. And on the right-hand side, we're thinking about those cells which surround the egg cell, the follicular cells, and their development as we go through the phase development of the female. And that's an interesting point, as the timeline is quite different to that of the males, as the process begins with mitosis of oogonium into primary oocytes, and they are held at prophase 1, and this all occurs during embryonic development. So in the embryonic ovary, cells have already gone to be held at the beginning of meiosis in prophase 1, and these follicles are known as primordial follicles, composed just of a simple set of single cells around the outside. Generally, the cells are relatively flattened at this stage. These primary oocytes in the primordial follicles will remain in that stage until after puberty and the influence of follicle stimulating hormone. Now, of course, you'll recall that follicle stimulating hormone, the target are the follicular cells. They are going to change shape, and they are going to increase by mitosis, and they are going to begin producing estrogen. And of course, that estrogen is having feedback effects on the pituitary, but also bringing about the development of the lining of the uterus as well, the endometrium. As this progresses under the influence of FSH in the first stage of the menstrual cycle, the primary oocytes will go through meiosis 1, and as they do so, of course, this involves the separation of the homologous pairs and should produce 2 haploid nuclei. But in fact, one of those degenerates into what is called the first polar body. So within the cell, only one of the haploid nuclei set are actually retained. And this occurs as we go from primary follicle. The number of follicular cells is increasing. It's enlarging towards the structure known as the Graafian follicle, which is actually causing a bulge on the surface of the whole ovary itself. At that stage, with the secretion of luteinizing hormone, the follicle will burst and will release into the oviduct the secondary oocyte. The secondary follicle has now progressed in its development and is now actually stopped at Metaphase 2 of meiosis. And so now this is in the oviduct and traveling down the oviduct, where if it encounters a sperm cell, then the process of fertilization, which is covered in other videos, the process of fertilization will result in the completion of meiosis and the formation of the zygote. This also requires the ejection of a second polar body composed largely of the replicate chromatids, which is here. So that is not included in that process. With the empty follicle now, this transforms into the corpus luteum, and of course the corpus luteum is responsible for the synthesis and secretion of progesterone, which is going to maintain the lining of the uterus in the second phase of the menstrual cycle. If we look at this in images, then here we have our primordial and primary oocytes here, and under the influence of FSH, they're increasing in size as the number of follicular cells, they change shape, but also they increase in number, and the secondary follicle becomes hollow with the oocyte in its center, like so. My diagram shows them moving to the right. In reality, a primary follicle will simply enlarge in location, increasing in size as it goes through the development. But to show those sequences, I've spread them across the page like so. The Graafian follicle, of course, is now causing the wall to bulge, and you'll recall under the influence of luteinizing hormone, it will actually rupture with the release of the oocyte in metaphase 2 of meiosis, and that will only progress if it encounters a sperm cell and fertilization occurs. And for the sake of completion, the corpus luteum, of course, a reminder, is producing the progesterone, which is maintaining the lining of the uterus in the second half of the menstrual cycle. And so that takes us through the stages of oogenesis in our consideration of human reproduction. Chance to subscribe to the channel there. The next video is lined up on the left and the playlist on the right. Thank you for listening.